the variables that we believe have really been instrumental in our progress. So culture and climate, sense of belonging, safety, relevancy of schoolwork. And while I'm talking, I want you to start thinking in your mind, which one of these would you believe would have the most impact if you had to force rate these in your organization? Because that's what we did with our principals. So prior to Alan and his team coming in, we asked our principals, where do you believe, just your intuition, where do you believe that if we, of all the distractions we have and all the implementations, if we focused all of our energy, it would have the greatest impact on our organization and moving us forward? So this is what we found. If you see the yellow line, that's the ranking based on our principals' intuition. So right away, you'll notice that number one was culture and climate. Number two was sense of belonging. So, our leaders, our staff are really good at knowing their craft and what they're doing. We could have easily spent a lot of time talking about sense of belonging and what direction would that take us as an organization? What could we do to focus on belonging? I mean, it could be more community activities, bringing parents, students in. You can imagine just all of that brainstorming that we could come up with. Culture and climate, it's a pretty broad topic. So how do you really focus in on that? If you see the blue line, that's what the data after going through the survey and the interviews told us. And number one, a little shock to everyone, was trust in principals and teachers. And what that did for us was begin the conversation of, how do we build that trust? And it wasn't a shock. I mean, we all know that it's important that people trust the people that are in charge of their child on a day-to-day basis. But what we found, and the answer to the question of where if we focused our attention, would it impact all the other variables, was that if you want parents and teachers or students to feel they belong to the school community and the school family, if they have that high level of trust in their principal and their teacher, then that connectivity follows. If you want them to feel safe, we could invest in building bigger walls or safety measures. But we also found that if instead you build that trust, then people feel safe. So that was a big aha. What that did for us was we retooled that summer using this data and decided as a district office that we would implement all new programs and run all communications through the local sites. So through principals and then through teachers to the home, capitalizing on knowing that the parent wants to hear from the person closest to their child. I know that hurts my feeling as a superintendent. I just have to get over that the guy in the suit is not the most important person. So we really just capitalized on that and thought, let's take a risk. Let's do it. Let's change the way we really communicate and roll things out in our district across all 11 sites. So the next big question is, if we do that, what will be the impact the following year? And you hope you are making some good predictions based on the data. This is what we found. When we were able to do that, you can see the trust between administrators in the first year. So data collected, the blue is in the 2019, 2020 is the orange. And I have to admit that there were some folks that said, we're already so high in this area. Why don't we pick an area that we're low in, right? And that would make, rational sense to say, let's, we're already doing well in this. But against that, following the data, we said, no, there's always room for improvement. And the data is solid that if we continue to improve in this area, it's going to raise all the other variables. Sure enough, you can see trust between administrators, 4.9 to 5.3, administrators trust in teachers, 5.3 to 5.5, administrators trust in parents, 5.1 to 5.3. So internally, that was fabulous and, really validated, I guess, that data and that work over that past year. So then that begged the next question, what's the impact of that work outward on the community as far as perceptions? And so looking at growth over time based on community outreach. So the community's perceptions of their communications from the district. You can see we went from a 4.9 to a 5.3 on outreach effort. You can see how many people are at or above the somewhat agree, which is just outstanding. And then the parent community involvement going from 5.2 to 5.5. So just absolutely extraordinary results, and validating to our continued effort to ensure that as a district office that we are collaborating with our staff, our teachers, and our principals, and ensuring that they own the work in our district as we push things out. And it's not a top down coming out from someone at district office with a teacher that may or may not be able to verbalize what's going on in that district. So that's the work that we were doing between the school sites, the district, and the community. Internally, we also recognize that the stronger our relationships and the stronger that we have trust between us will also lead to that end that we're looking for. So we asked the question, how often do you get recognized for your efforts by each AUSD site and central office administrator, weekly and daily basis? So here's our results in 2019. And this is pretty decent, comparatively speaking. When I was looking at, and I, twisted Alan's arm to show me other schools that he was working at, other school districts. So I was pretty impressed, but you do recognize that there are some isolated circles, some circles that have an arrow going to them, but not reciprocating. So clearly the goal here from my standpoint is asking the question, what might cause in our organization a staff member, a leader, because this is every supervisor, someone that supervises someone else in our district, what would cause them to not reach out for help, and what would cause our organization not to reach out to them? Notice I didn't say, who are the dots? Let's name them. Let's identify who they are, and let's ask them what's their problem. That's the easy question. The more difficult is to approach it from a systemic approach of what would cause a person in our organization not to reach out, and so that we're fixing the system, not just trying to go after individual people. Very important point. Did it again in 2020, and I want to share that we were very deliberate in this work, but you can see the increased number of communications and networks that starts to happen. What we did was we asked each supervisor to pick 3 people that they may not know on a deep level, and deliberately create a better relationship with that person over the year. So it was everything from just having lunches or meeting them for coffee, talking about their work, sharing ideas, going on learning walks, whether it was someone from the custodial side of the business side of our organization to the principals at the sites, really just trying to grow that organizational knowledge of what's going on in the organization. Very exciting. And again, you can see now the average degree 1.71 goes to a 3.41, and that reciprocity from a 0.13 to 0.21. So just really impressive results, and knowing that we are just starting on this journey. So let me share quickly a couple of real personal impacts that I've seen from this work. The first one is that when we went into the pandemic, and of course the lockdown that suddenly came for us, a lot of districts around us went into what I would call a crisis mode, right? This is very different. We haven't faced this before, and we need a new way of operating, of managing that's very direct, top down. People are at home. We don't have or you can't run down the hall and talk to someone. We didn't have to do that. Due to this work and our high level of trust that we had built, and knowing that the data demonstrates that, our message was simply this: we've been training for this for years. We've got this, right? We have agency. We have a high level of trust across our organization that professionals, when supported and given the tools they need, will bring their very best work each day to work. So regardless if they were working from home, from the office, we were separated, people in isolation, there was that trust that they were going to make the best decision for our kids in the end. And we ultimately had a very successful year. And a lot of people are talking about the learning loss. And quite frankly, we're spending more time talking about the learning gains that our students have had this year above any other year because of the opportunities within this challenge. Clearly, there's always going to be some gaps that we will be addressing when students come back full in the fall. But overall, we're talking more about the learning gains. The second one is a little difficult to share. Like most superintendents, it was a lose-lose situation in that there was a period of time where half the community wanted us to come back and needed their kids to be out of the house and in school, and didn't care about the safety or didn't believe that it was a safety risk. And then we had half of the community that absolutely was dead bent on, we shouldn't be at school and just for health and safety reasons. So it was very toxic. Both sides were very loud. And specifically, the group that stood out the most, really complaining in this toxic behavior, we recognized a trend that it tended to be our parents of kindergartners that had never experienced us as an organization or had a relationship with me or anyone else in the district prior to being in this lockdown. So there was no relationship created there. So one of my board members decided to take this learning and our practice of restorative practices across our district, which is tied directly to this level of trust and the value of relationships, and said, David, would you be willing if I reach out to these parents and sit around a fire in our backyard? I know that sounds very Southern California, but would you be willing to come to a restorative circle in my backyard, and we'll social distance, we'll wear our masks, and just meet with this small group of parents? Of course, it's just part of our values, and to always move toward the pain. That's kind of one of my mottos. So we did it. And the important thing to share is we spent 4.5 hours together, not talking about if or why we should open schools, but we just talked about the impact of the pandemic on our families directly. And we each took times. We had a speaking ball, and each of us took times. And if you were speaking, no one else would speak. After that 4.5 hours, we didn't solve the mystery of should we be back in school or not, but we left with a deeper understanding of each other personally and professionally, of why they believe what they do, and why as a superintendent I'm making the decisions I'm making. We still have a long way to go with that group of parents, but I can share with you that they didn't come back to any more board meetings. They didn't go on social media anymore and rip the district and individuals and that toxicity. I'm just sharing that because that was a real risk and an uncomfortable moment. But for me, just really validates this work that we've been doing as a district, but then how it can even be taken to a higher level with a school board, an elected official recognizing the importance of this work in our community. So it's been quite the journey. I really can't say enough about what the data has done to support and guide that work. And Alan, I think mentioned earlier, but my principals, I know it's validated when my principals have asked me to have Alan and his team kick off our summer retreat, which is usually just very personal to us. There's no outsiders, no consultants, no vendors. They asked me if Alan could be the one to kick off the data to help guide our work, create our theme for this upcoming year. So very exciting, and thank you all for the opportunity to share this work with you.